Freddy vs. Jason, the Novelization, by Stephan. Chapter 7. There was a red and green sign pinned to the wall above Kia's head as she sat out in the waiting room. The sign read, "How are you doing?" There was another sign on the wall next to Gib, who was sitting beside Kia on the row of brown leather seats. The sign over Gib said, "Give blood, save lives." Both girls had been working their way through some fashion magazines that were piled up on the waiting room table. They'd been here for some time now, hoping to get some news on their friend. Gib seemed to be nodding off, though. It was hard to tell under her ever-present baseball cap. Kia flicked through the glossy photo pages. She was pretty much on top of the fashion thing right now, in her knee-high boots, floral skirt, and intricately designed ethnic top. Whereas Gib's hands had probably seen only soap and water that morning, Kia's fingers were immaculately manicured, and she wore a sprinkling of rings, a snappy wristband, and a silver watch to die for. Kia looked at her watch now. She called up to the nurse, working quietly at her desk. "How much longer?" she asked. "Is Lori okay or what?" With an annoyed look on her face, the nurse stared at Kia, slowly raised a finger to her lips, and went, "Shh!" All the crap Kia had been through over these last 2 days, and all she got was this bullshit? Kia shook her head and went back to her magazine, where she saw page after page of perfect-looking models, which was not what she needed. She looked up at the nurse again. "For a nose job, what kind of anesthesia do doctors use? Did they put you all the way under?" Again, the nurse said nothing. She just pointed to a sign on the wall behind her desk. Kia read it. "The nurse can't help you." What kind of hospital is this? Whatever. Kia returned to the magazine a further time, and whoa! When she turned the page, she saw there was a section on cosmetic surgery. The models, all women, were semi-naked, but they had marker lines on their faces and bodies, showing where surgical incisions were going to be made. It was horrible. Okay, it was only a marker pen or something, but it made them look like human jigsaws. Kia turned the page. Oh, like gross! The magazine showed totally real before and after photos of people who had plastic surgery done on their faces. Only the after shots had been taken immediately after the operations. The faces looked bruised, scarred, cut, blooded, scabbed over. Kia turned the page, and another, and another, and another. But the pictures just got worse. She couldn't believe that anyone would want to print this kind of stuff. It was horrible. When Kia got to the photographs depicting a veritable arsenal of bizarre and terrifying surgical instruments, she nearly hurled. And, no way! No way! She was looking at pieces of bone, chipped and hacked away, and mounds of flesh and fat, all red and glistening in shining metal receptacles, and people with scars, injuries, amputees. She turned the page faster, faster. A body wired up to metal hooks and electroclamps, faster. A hellish collage of vivisected women, faster. More flesh, faster. More horror, faster. A glove with long rusty blades fixed to the fingers, forming a death claw. The glove shot forward out of the photograph, reaching out through the flat pages of the magazine, to tear like a frenetic slicing machine into Kia's nose and face. She flung herself back, the great gaping hole in the middle of her face spraying hot, crimson blood across the fashion magazine. "Got your nose!" laughed Freddy. Kia howled and woke up. The magazine lay open on her lap at an article entitled, "Is Red and Green the New Black?" She tossed the journal to the floor as if it were a venomous snake. Beside her, Gib recoiled in shock. Then she just stared at Kia, afraid. No big. Kia had just been daydreaming, but the memory of the daydream was still fresh in Kia's mind. Without thinking, she touched her nose to see. Kia shuddered. She was having a nosebleed. "Strong work," complained Will. "I came to make sure she's okay, and you put her in the infirmary? What were you thinking telling her all that stuff, man? We're not in group. Will and Mark were waiting in the school hallway outside of the infirmary. To say that Will had not been impressed by Mark's callous behavior would be an understatement. But Mark was taking nothing back. Something was starting to add up here. Mark shot straight back at Will. I'm thinking, for the first time in my life, that maybe I'm not crazy. She had the same dream. My brother was right. Before Bobby had killed himself, he told Mark everything. In fact, he told everyone he could about his nightmares, about the children and the rhyme, about Freddy Krueger. He'd said Krueger was coming for him. Bobby had said that Krueger was going to kill him. But no one believed him. So Bobby had died. How could Laurie have dreamt the same thing as his brother unless... Suddenly a voice called down the corridor. Will? Mark? I need to talk to you. It was Principal Shea with a couple of police officers. Shit, said Will under his breath. The school principal was dressed in smart casual clothing, and he had that lived-in look typical among 60s flower children who'd found themselves on a regular salary and voting Republican 30 or 40 years down the road. However, unlike many of his peers, Shea took a progressive approach to education. Indeed, when he first came to Springwood High, he'd soon learned that a formal or heavy-handed method only made things worse. But there were times when you had to draw the line. The cops fanned out either side of Shea as he tried to defuse any potential situation here. Take it easy, boys, the principal continued. Nobody wants any trouble. The important thing is that you're safe. Now, if you'd let these officers take you back to the hospital, which was all Will and Mark needed to hear. They ran like crazy, catching the cops off balance and forcing their way through a nearby emergency exit, triggering the alarm. It didn't take long for the police officers to gather their wits. But by the time they reached the street by the side of the school, the two boys were plain out of sight. One of the officers reached for his radio. Those lunatics wouldn't get far. There were only so many places they could go. But Will and Mark didn't go to their homes, nor did they go back to Springwood High, instead taking care to dodge every cop and patrol car they came across. The two of them made their way to Springwood Town Library. Will didn't see any sense in this. It had been Mark's idea. He had got to thinking about the past, he said, about what his brother had said all those years ago, and about Laurie's dream. How could Laurie have had the same nightmare as his brother? Why did they both dream about the same maniac killer? It doesn't make any sense, said Mark. The two of them were huddled around a Stone Age microfilm viewer. There's nothing on this Krueger, not his arrest, death, not even a birth certificate. Maybe he never even existed, suggested Will. You ever think of that? Maybe they just didn't put the stuff on film or computer yet. Wait a second, look at this. Will moved over and looked at the copy of the newspaper front page that Mark had found. It was the local Springwood Daily from some years back. Large sections of the page had been blacked out, leaving only partial headlines and the occasional picture. Mark scrolled forward. Check it out, man. Whole sections of the records are gone. Just look at all these blacked out obituaries. Mark was on to something. Quickly, he pulled out another microfilm roll and put it under the viewer. He was looking for a specific date. Again, more missing sections, more blacked out paragraphs. This was scary shit. January 18, he said at last. The day my brother committed suicide. Why isn't that in here? This was getting too much for Will. It was beginning to sound crazy even for two escaped inmates from Weston Hills. All these years he'd had trouble convincing Mark that he'd seen Laurie's father commit murder, but now Mark had turned the tables. It was Will who was having trouble believing. I don't know, he said, but I'm sure there's a good reason. Remember in group how they told us not to jump to conclusions before? Mark grabbed Will by the shirt. Jesus, listen to yourself. You hold on to that psychobabble like a security blanket. Let it go, man. Let it go. He himself let Will go as if to illustrate. They covered him up, Will. They never told us about Freddy, because that's how they decided to beat him. They went after him like he was a fucking disease. Locked the kids up who'd made contact with him, so, I don't know, so they wouldn't infect the others. That's crazy, man. Is it? How come we're never allowed to call any of our friends? How come none of our friends ever call us? We were in fucking quarantine, man. That's what Weston Hills was for. The real crazy thing is that it all worked. Until now. Is that what you're saying? Will asked, shaking his head in disbelief. Mark took no pleasure in nodding the affirmative. It was just beginning to fully sink in that some bastard could have murdered his brother after all. And all this time their parents, their friends, everyone had thought it was suicide. The kids diagnosed with AHS, they were all Freddy's children. Later that night, Kia, Gib, and Lori were heading out of town in Kia's metallic red, open-top Jeep. The rest of the day had passed in a blur. Lori had checked out fine. The school doctor said she just needed some sleep, that's all. And Kia's nosebleed, too, was just a normal reaction to all the stress she'd been through. All the same, they'd left school early and made the decision to go to Freeburg's rave. They needed to bounce back. They couldn't just hide in a box and wait for the next bad thing to happen. And what if the police were right? What if it had been Blake? The guy had been pretty drunk all night at Lori's house. Dr. Campbell certainly was in total agreement with Sheriff Williams on this issue. But he'd still been acting a little strange before Lori's friends came to pick her up. By now, a strange unreality had descended on the three of them. They were in the eye of a hurricane of homicide, and they were going out to party, almost as if they were desperate for their lives to get back to some type of normalcy. Lori had one of Freeburg's yellow cards in her hands. She sat in the passenger seat, giving Kia road directions. Gib rode shotgun. Lori was concerned for her. Since the death of Trey, Gib had looked as if she'd lost it. But now she was somehow overcompensating. She wanted to party like she'd never partied before, as if she was in denial or something. Lori turned around to look back at her. "Are you sure you're up for this, Gib?" "You kidding?" Gib swigged on her beer. "I've never been more up for something, ever. All I want to do tonight is forget." Mark waited for the patrol car to slowly roll on by, then hurried up the driveway of his home, where he used to live before he became a permanent guest of Weston Hills. The house appeared empty and no one was around, but it wasn't the house that Mark Davis was interested in right now. Keeping low, he led his friend along to the carport, where some kind of large vehicle was hidden beneath a heavy gray tarp. Will was still trying to catch up with Mark's thinking. "Even if what you're saying is true, come on, Mark, why didn't Freddy kill Lori?" I don't know. Maybe he's not strong enough yet," Mark answered. My brother said it's our fear that gives him his power." "Well, you sure as hell spread enough fear today at school." This hit Mark. It hit him bad. "Oh, shit. Holy shit, you're right. They wanted to forget Freddy so they wouldn't fear him. Oh, what if I screwed up the town's plan?" He started to panic. "Oh, God, this fucker's gonna spread like the plague. Kids are gonna start falling asleep, and it's gonna be a bloodbath. We gotta get out. Let's leave, man, right now." Will shook his head. "I can't. Not after today. I need to tell Lori where I've been all these years. Make sure she's okay." "She worth dying for? 'Cause if you fall asleep, man, you ain't waking up." "If that's the case, how come you're not dead, or any of the freaks at Weston? When's the last time you even had a nightmare?" Mark was going out of his mind with fear, but this question stopped him in his tracks. I don't know." He frowned. I can't remember my dreams anymore." Will grabbed his friend's shoulder and smiled. "Look," he said warmly, "just give me one night, okay? Let me find Lori. And then you know what? We're out of here." Mark considered for a moment, his eye twitching, and then he nodded. "All right, but if your ass isn't back here by dawn, I'm gone. Are we clear on that?" Will was definitely clear on that. Mark asked him to help with the tarp. Taking a quick look around to check no one was watching them, the two guys lifted the heavy covering aside to reveal one motherfucker of a van. "Now be careful," warned Mark. "This baby was my brother's pride and joy." Which Will found hard to believe. Not so much because of the van itself, which was a pretty powerful beast, but because of the bespoke airbrushed artwork on the side. A painting of a huge-breasted armored warrior babe taking an axe to a giant serpent. Fantasy art at its most lame. "So let me guess," smirked Will. "The serpent is a huge dick and she's trying to tame it." Mark was almost embarrassed. Bobby had his issues, all right? But at that moment, all Will felt was gratitude. Mark had gotten him out of Weston Hills, and he was now doing Will a major league favor by lending Will his brother's automotive nirvana. And Mark was fighting his fear that by talking to Lori he might have just unleashed Freddy Krueger on the children of Springwood. Will got into the van, checked the fuel gauge. Then he smiled at Mark and pulled slowly out of the driveway. Mark watched the taillights of the van disappear around the corner of the street. "For God's sake, Will, be careful." Chapter 8. Kia turned the Jeep down a long, dark road. They were out in the country. To the right, a dense cornfield stretched as far as they could see. Lori was almost mesmerized by the repetition of the corn stalks as they flickered past in the headlights. Finally, she looked across to Kia. "Why are they having it out here in the middle of nowhere?" she asked. Kia turned to Lori as if she was being a dumbass. That's the point, Lori. So the cops won't bust it up?" Then Kia turned her attention. There was someone standing in the middle of the road. "Oh, shit!" He was tall, massive, and was that some kind of white mask on his face? Kia yanked the wheel, barely missing the suicidal idiot. "Christ, Kia," said Gib from the back. "I'm the one that's fucked up. What the fuck are you doing?" There was someone in the road, okay?" Kia protested, but the other two girls hadn't seen anyone. Another mile down the highway, they came across a scarecrow. Like that's all they needed, but the sinister effigy was actually a sign, showing where corn had been cut away to form a lane that went deep into the cornfield. Kia hung a right at the scarecrow, and soon they were passing through the dark sea of corn stalks, with only the beam of their headlamps to light the way. As they drove further and further into the field, they could hear something over the sound of the engine, something loud, repetitive, insistent. Cool. They could hear the energizing pounding of some block-rocking beats. Seconds later, the Jeep rolled to a halt in a clearing that was being used as a makeshift car park. Despite herself, Lori could feel her spirits lifting. She could hear the beats, feel the bass, and there were cars, trucks, pickups, and people. Lots of people of all ages and backgrounds united in their one goal to have some kick-ass fun. Wasting no time, the three of them got out of their vehicles and followed a trail of people through a narrow path between the dense corn stalks. Suddenly, the path opened upon a wide circular clearing where everything was totally happening. Welcome to the rave. There were 100 or so kids throwing shapes in front of the DJ, moving to the pumping bass in a great heaving mass of delirious abandon. Copper tiki torches mounted on cane posts shone around the perimeter of the dance space. Strobes scattered the night, perfectly complementing the heavy, swirling music. There were stacked kegs of beer. They had a small generator out here flashing lights with some serious megawatts, and everyone was having the greatest time. Surely here they could lose themselves amidst the music, the lights, and the pure energy of the dancing crowds. Some of the party people had even parked their cars around the edge of the clearing, and had left their headlights on, pointed in towards the dance reaction. And the kids hurling themselves around in abandoned bliss to the music looked pretty damn awesome. even to Kia's jaded and cynical eyes, usually on the alert for the merest hint of a fashion crime. The swath of huge, baggy combat boots, ruffled jackets, and hair extensions, sported by boys and girls alike, were hip and happening. Hell, even the chemical liquid glow sticks they waved had recently been taste rehabilitated and were now just about cool again. Gib reached out and grabbed a cup of beer from a guy's hand as he bounced past, the most enormous, blessed-out grin on his face. He didn't care. It was party time. People, come on, lighten up. And she was kinda cute, even in those tomboy threads. "Are you feeling better, Gib?" asked Lori. "Yeah, I'm officially in retox." Then she was gone, vanishing in the pulsing body wave, arms already above her head, leaving Lori and Kia behind. Beyond the clearing, Laura could see a massive grain silo. Kia could see it too. The tall, round-top cylinder. Oh God, it was making her feel horny. She needed therapy. At the foot of the silo lay an old rusted corn picker surrounded by weeds. The rave seemed almost quiet from out here, and the tall grain store was only faintly illuminated by the party lights in the near distance. A hand reached out and grabbed one of the long, sharp cutting rods of the picker. It was Jason Voorhees. He broke the rod free, then strode off through the corn in the direction of the rave. The girls he had seen at the house were here. They had escaped him. Then they had nearly hit him back there on the road. They had to die. Frisell took a break from his thrashing. He was dripping with sweat, and he now had only one thing on his mind. He'd had the beer. He'd taken the beats. Now it was time to get nasty. "Hey, honeydew," he called half out of his dancing skull. "You down for a light show?" He waved his glow stick in Kia's face. Bad move. "You down for some pepper spray?" she snapped back. Which did the job. Frisell went back to his trippy contortions, and Kia and Lori got lost in the crowd. Over at the entrance to the rave, a small red scooter sputtered noisily to a halt. Its rider looked like a mailman or something. His helmet was way too big. It was Linderman. "Hey, Linderman!" Oh no, he'd only just got here, and now he'd been eyeballed by Shaq and his Neanderthal football buddies. Linderman tried to make a break for it, but he was surrounded by a circle of inebriated muscle. "Come here, buddy!" bellowed Shaq. "We got something for you." "Actually, Shaq, I'm headed over..." The next thing Linderman knew, his helmet was yanked off and a colossal tube of beer was forced through his lips. He tried to break free, but this only resulted in the whole damn thing spilling all over his face. This was the most hilarious thing the jock squad had seen all night. A nerd drowning in beer. Too much. "Great," said Linderman, his thin suede paneled jacket soaking with beer. "Thanks, guys. Really." Shaq and his buddies just laughed and left Linderman alone with his stink of booze. What a start to the evening. In the center of the clearing, the dancing was hard and fast. The drum and bass music was mental. At the heart of the rolling bodies, amidst flickering the strobes, Linderman could see Gib. Wow, she's changed since this morning. And she had. Gib was trashed. She was dancing wildly, whipping her head around, spilling her beer. She was out of it at the speed of sound. On the other side of the clearing, Freeburg was talking to some spaced-out weirdo, Rich, who was wearing a big dumb cloth hat and sucking on a pacifier. "Freeburg, man!" called Rich. "What's up? I've been looking for you, dog. I need the magic." He sure as hell did, if the redness of his eyes was anything to go by. But it was all magic to Freeburg's ears. "Then come to the mountain, pilgrim," he proclaimed. "I can bestow what you seek." Then he seamlessly carried out a neat conjuring trick and pulled a small white ecstasy tablet out of Rich Dude's ear. Oh, these guys know how to have fun. Linderman was not impressed. "Hey, there's Lori. Alone." Linderman hurried over to her, trying not to look too eager. He'd already screwed up once today at school. Hey, Lori? Didn't think I'd see you here. Can I get you something to drink?" "Smooth opening," said Kia, stepping forward, handing a beer to Lori. But, we're taken care of." Lori saw the state of Linderman's shirt and jacket. "What happened to your clothes?" she asked kindly. This? Me and the lower primates were playing a drinking game. But it seems I was penalized for my ability to read above a 4th grade level." "I just figured you for a straight-up bedwetter," deadpanned Kia. Just like she always did, she flamed him again. She was Lori's firewall against this no-timer. But Linderman was pissed. First Shaq, and now this. "You know, Kia, I used to think you hated me because you thought I wasn't good enough for Lori. But that's not it. You tear me down to make yourself feel better because you really hate yourself. Which is kind of pathetic if you stop and think about it. Assuming, of course, you can think, with all that makeup and hair dye weighing your head down." Not exactly witty, not exactly succinct. Nowhere near cutting, but it got the job done. Linderman stalked off, leaving Kia speechless. Lori found herself smiling as she watched him go. Screw dancing." Gib was out of beer, sweaty and drunk. She stumbled over to the crowd by the beer kegs and got in line. She couldn't help overhear what the guys in front of her were saying. "The cops are saying Blake committed suicide, grief over Trey," said one girl in silvery halter top and cutoffs, dancing on the spot to a rhythm only she heard. That's bullshit," replied her friend. She swayed a little too much and overcompensated with the jerk, then reached out a hand uselessly to steady herself. Her pupils were so wide her eyes looked completely black. "I heard this guy Krueger killed them both. I said his name to my parents and they almost shit themselves." "And supposedly?" Now it was Freeburg, master of ceremonies, talking 20 to the dozen. "That Freddy freak used to live here." He shook his head. "Fucking gutted Trey like a goddamn turkey. Like, I heard there were these intestines and shit hanging out of him." Freeburg saw Gibb staring at him, and any more words froze in his throat. He stood there, mouth open, like a complete idiot. Damn. Gibb dropped her empty plastic cup and bolted off in the direction of the silo. Suddenly she needed some peace and quiet. "Look who's here!" Lori followed Kia's pointing finger and saw Will. Finding Lori had been easy. Will had picked up one of Freeburg's cards back at the high school, and Will Rollins was a local boy. He knew his way around town. He wished Mark had come out with him, though, but understood his friend's reluctance. Besides which, Will was here to heal some old wounds with Lori, and Mark didn't need to see that. Kia had slipped away herself by the time Will stepped up. "Hey," he said. "Hey." Lori's flowing blonde hair looked great in the party lights, and her face, God, he'd missed her. "I heard you might be here," he said. "How are you feeling? Are you okay?" Lori's reply was quiet, tender. "I'm fine. It was just what happened the other night. Then seeing you." "Yeah," Will shrugged. "I'm sorry about that. I used to spend hours thinking about what I'd say to you if I saw you again, and let's just say that wasn't how I rehearsed it." God, her beautiful hair, her gorgeous green eyes, and that white top. Linderman's heart was breaking as he looked over at Lori talking to Will. And Linderman's heart would break into 42 little fucking pieces if Jason had anything to do with it. Voorhees watched Linderman from within the cover of the cornstalks. He watched them all. Teenagers drinking, smoking, taking drugs, making out, dancing, singing, having a good time. Still holding on to the cutting rod of the corn picker, Jason Voorhees stepped forward towards the light, his undead ribs vibrating with the bass of the jungle stack amplified mayhem. Meanwhile, Gibb swayed drunkenly beneath the shadow of the grain silo. The rave was still going on in the distance. They were all there, all her friends, having a good time. Fucking A1 like I give a shit. In extreme contrast to the rain and thunder of last night, it was dry and warm. There wasn't even a breeze to rustle the corn. So what just made that sound? The sound of rustling in the corn? Gibb turned and saw Trey. Trey, her boyfriend, her dead fucking boyfriend, walked slowly out of the cornstalks. His skin was deathly pale, and his eyes were a sickly yellow color. He was dead. He had to be dead. Oh no. Trey opened his mouth to talk. "Babe, I'm dead one day," he slurred, "and you're already out getting shit-faced? Same old Gib." "Trey, I can't believe it." Had there been a mistake down at the morgue? How? Who? "Come on," said Trey. "Let's go." And he turned towards the red silo door. It was already partway open. Gib couldn't move. She couldn't believe it. Trey was alive. Trey's eyes narrowed. "Babe, don't make me ask you twice, okay?" Flashback. Gib could see him, standing on the staircase of 1428 Elm Street. He'd said that exact same thing to her just before going upstairs for his final rendezvous with sex and death. And just like he did on Elm Street, Trey left without her. Only this time he was hobbling. He pushed the red door fully open, then limped into the darkness of the silo. Gib was confused, too drunk and too frightened to figure it out. But it was Trey. She could make sense of it all later. For now, she entered the silo behind him. And steam blasted in her face. Steam? Gib looked up. Since when have there been pipes in a grain silo? Water dripped down on the ground. And why is it so hot in here? Trey was walking ahead of her. He was still limping, only now he seemed more hunched. Gib couldn't see him too clearly. There was a faint light coming from somewhere, an iron furnace. But Trey was mostly in shadow. And why did he keep touching his face and his chin? "You're walking funny," called Gib. "What's wrong?" Trey turned sharply, savagely. "The hell do you think's wrong, bitch? I had a fucking machete shoved up my ass!" His face was mangled. His neck was broken. That's why he kept holding his head, to stop it falling to the ground. Trey was balancing his fucking mangled head on his fucking broken neck. Gib screamed in abject terror. She turned to run back towards the silo door, but the silo door was gone. The deeply sinister laughter echoed all around her, causing her to cringe in fear. Lori couldn't remember when she'd last had so many shocks, so many surprises in just 24 hours. She touched Will's face. Was he real, or just another dream? "Where have you been, Will?" "Didn't you get my letters?" "What letters?" "Jesus, Lori, I must have sent you hundreds of them. You never even got one?" In an instant, Mark's words flashed through Will's mind. Mark's conspiracy thing. The whole damn Krueger deal. Maybe the town was trying to cover it all up, hide it, stop Freddy by locking away the only kids who'd been dreaming about him, the only kids who'd given him power. He grew angry. "It's funny, all this time I thought you didn't want to write me back. But they must have never even mailed them." "Who?" asked Lori, having to deal with yet another shock. "The doctors at Weston Hills." Weston Hills? Will turned his face to the ground. He didn't want her to see him like this, but she had to know. "I've been in a psychiatric hospital," he said. "Mark was with me there. Some other kids, too." Lori was still struggling with Weston Hills. I don't understand." This was no surprise to Will. He hadn't fully understood either until today. Only now was he beginning to comprehend the immense scale of the problem. Whether or not this Freddy was real, the townsfolk seemed to think so, which is why all the kids were being locked up. And Dr. Campbell was at the center of all of this, somehow. Lori just had to roll with it for now. Will would tell her everything she wanted to know the moment he was certain they were out of any immediate danger. "I saw the news the other night, that kid was killed at your house. I needed to know that you were safe. What happened, Lori?" "I don't know," said Lori, bewildered. "We didn't see who did it, and the police have been acting weird, like they know something. I heard them mention a name, Freddy someone, but in my dreams I heard the name Freddy Krueger." Will's eyes opened wide at the mention of that bastard name. But his next question came straight out of nowhere. "Lori, where was your dad?" "Out of town." Lori didn't get the connection. "Are you sure?" What was he getting at? Lori stared at him, wondering what his deal was. "What's going on, Will?" Oh God, oh God, oh God. Will didn't want to do this, but he had to. She had to know. It all tied in somehow. He couldn't just give her half the picture. If they didn't communicate, they could all wind up killed. Will took a deep breath. "You see, 4 years ago, I thought I saw..." Fuck, this is hard. "I know you're never going to believe this." Lori wanted the truth. Why was he asking these questions about her dad? "Just try me," she pressed. Will took another deep breath. "Okay, let's drive straight off the cliff and dive straight into the deep end." Hey, what do you know? She must have fallen from the skies like an angel, man. A fucking angel. Frizzell, curly hair all over the place, leather jacket rolled up at the sleeves, waved his glow stick absently as he danced over to where she lay. Okay, so that other chick had somehow managed to resist his magnetic charms, but she did have 2 mightily tasty friends who were certain to know a fine-looking hunk of a man when they saw one. All night he'd kept an eye on one in particular, the foxy, drunken chick in the baseball cap. But then he'd gone and lost her. Blame it on the beer. Maybe he had been putting too much away. Only now God had smiled on him. He'd come out here to take a leak and get lost, if lost is the right word, 'cause Frizzell had stumbled on his angel, Gib, lying on the ground, fast asleep. She was like something from Da Vinci, man. She just lay there in a frame of discarded beer cups, and her legs went on for fucking ever. Frizzell scoped the lay of the land. He could see a good 20 feet thanks to the glow sticks he'd pinned all over himself all evening. Roughly 1 every 10 minutes at last count. But he still found it hard to make sense of anything. The corn kept swaying like the fucking ocean. Whatever. He didn't think anybody was out there. Out there, get it? Rubbing the side of his addled head, he staggered over to Gib. Whoa! The way she was flinching and kicking, she either had a taser up her ass or she was having a real bad dream, man. She was in a boiler room. How the hell did she get there? More importantly, how was she going to get back out? There was that horrible noise again. It was like someone scraping the world's worst fingernails down the world's worst blackboard. Gib didn't know that the awful screeching was actually the sound of metal knives on rusted boiler pipes. This was Krueger's favorite bit, the chase. Oh, the fear it created. The lovely, lovely fear. The sound was getting closer, so she ran. She didn't know where she was going or where the exit was, but she knew that she had to get away from that terrifying noise. What the fuck? The walls, they were moving, stretching like sheets of elastic, showing the prowling form of a man as if someone was crawling inside them. The pipes as well. The place was a boiler room. A fucking boiler room. It was all metal. It shouldn't move like that.
"Oh, Gib! I see you!"
"You're the one that killed Trey!" Gib shouted. Her words echoed around the boiler room. She couldn't see who was after her, but she knew who it had to be. The walls were still now, normal once again. Something threw a shadow across the wall behind Gib. It was the shadow of a gangling man wearing a distinctive old-fashioned fedora, and he seemed to have very long fingers on one hand.
"Forget about my errand, boy,"
growled Freddy from his hiding place. Gib turned and ran. She ran as hard as she could, but the place was like a maze. There were walls and pipes all around her, and no matter how fast she ran, she kept seeing glimpses of her stalker. He seemed to be everywhere. It wasn't possible.
"The only thing you have to fear,"
came the voice of Krueger as he leapt out right in front of her.
It's Fear himself!
Gibbs screamed. Sweet music for Freddy to drink in. This was what he'd been waiting for. This made all the years in hell worthwhile. Bathed in a repellent red light, Krueger savored the moment, then let the bitch go running and screaming away down the metal walkway.
They just didn't get it, did they?
Ow! Kickin'! Frizzell was now laying next to Gib on the ground, and as she fled from Freddy in her dreams, her sleeping body twitched and jerked on the soil of the cornfield. Frizzell positioned himself where Gib's shaking legs could take best effect. All the fun one man can stand without batteries, he laughed. Then he leaned across and kissed Gib on the cheek. She stank of beer and cigarettes. Awesome! The catwalk took Gib past a series of lockers, which is where she stopped. Running was getting her nowhere fast. Quickly, she opened a locker and slipped inside. Then quietly, ever so quietly, she closed the locker door and looked out through 3 slits at head height, comprising an air vent. She didn't have to wait long. The moment she heard Freddy's shoes clang on the metal floor, Gib held back on the heavy breathing. Then she saw him, Freddy. Gib held her breath for as long as she could see that ugly bastard deep-panned face through the locker vents. Her lungs were on the point of bursting when he finally stepped out of view. Gib got her breath back, trying desperately to contain the sound of her gasping. When she was done, she slowly moved up to the slits in the door. She peered left, nothing. Then right, nothing. She reached for the door, and Freddy's face burst into view, filling the 3 horizontal gaps in the metal panel. But he was upside down. Gibbs screamed and threw herself against the back of the locker interior, her eyes not able to believe what they were seeing as Freddy's face turned clockwise, rotating like a wheel, until finally his foul features were the right way up. She was trapped. His strength returning, Freddy threw open the door of the locker and began to pull back his razor claw for the kill. When blood spurted over the pockmarks and scars of his flame-ravaged face, Gib was already bleeding. She had a wound in her stomach. Blood was spreading across the belly of Gib's shirt, and she started to cough up gouts of scarlet-rich internal fluid, her eyes uncomprehending. He hadn't touched her. He hadn't... Right before Freddy Krueger's very eyes, Gib slowly began to disappear.
No!
He bellowed. Then he lunged forward and slashed at her fading form with the knives on his fingers, but he was only slicing thin air.
I had her!
He raged.
She was mine! She's mine!
Krueger dived into the cabinet and hacked at the empty space like his death depended on it. Frizzell and Gib were dead. They had been pig-stuck to the ground by the cutting rod from the corn-picking machine. Jason had impaled them both, while Frizzell had been laying on top of Gib, rubbing his groin on her. Now they both lay bloodied and dead, the rusted shaft passing through Frizzell's back into Gib's stomach, and then out Gib's back into the soil. They were locked in an unholy coupling of bad dreams and dry humping. It was this merciless harpooning that had snatched Gib from Freddy Krueger's nightmare world. Krueger had been unwittingly thwarted by the unstoppable locomotive of death named Jason Voorhees. Jason stopped for a moment to twist the long steel skewer. He shook it almost curiously, so that both bodies flapped about like scarecrows. Scarecrows with realistic entrails. When he was done, he tried to pull the rod free. Gib slipped back and flopped onto the ground, but the rod had somehow got jammed between the vertebrae of Frizzell's spine. Jason pulled and jiggled the metal shaft, but he could not shake Frizzell loose, and Frizzell was still alive. "Oh man, too much beer, I feel awful," Frizzell groaned, giving Jason all the impetus he needed to lift Frizzell high up on the end of the rod like a bale of hay, ready for the back of the harvester. He then flipped Frizzell back over his head, tossing him with such force that the raver flew off the end of the spear as if launched from a catapult. Jason watched Frizzell's glow sticks arc through the night sky like a shooting star of ill omen. Okay, Slashaholics, this has been chapters 7 and 8 of Freddy vs. Jason, the novelization by Stephan Hand. Again, carbon copies of the movie with a few slight differences. But you know what? I'm digging the hell out of this novelization. Jason X was kind of written the same, where it's pretty much the same as the movie, but a few extra things, some more backstory here and there, and some more inner thoughts of certain characters. So I'm not complaining. I'm really enjoying this book. I'm glad that you all are enjoying this book. At least that's what I'm gathering from the feedback that most of you have posted on the community page. And I look forward to tackling more of this book. We're really getting to the meat of the story now. We're already at the rave, and where we left off is right before one of my favorite scenes in the movie. Can't wait to get back to that, when Shaq meets up with Jason. Curious to see if that's written similar or the same in the book as it happened in the movie. But let's talk about these chapters tonight. Because, like, one of my biggest complaints about Freddy vs. Jason the movie is Freddy only getting the one kill. I hope in the book he gets more than one, but I'm kind of doubting it. But that would be awesome if he got at least 2 kills of, before his badass fight with Jason, which I'm curious how that's going to be written and how Jason's nightmare is going to play out in the book. But I always enjoyed the Gibb nightmare in the boiler room. Classic Freddy. Major props to the movie for that scene and the novelization. That whole thing with freaking Gibb and dude getting on her and stuff is just so creepy. And anyways, I'm glad he died. It sucks that Gibb died like that, but it's always been kind of cool that Freddy goes in for the kill, that Jason had already done it and it pissed him off. Which makes sense, because, see, Freddy's more methodical with his killing than Jason. Jason just go through hack and slash everybody. But Freddy wants to toy with him. And I think this was a lesson for Freddy that you snooze, you lose. And always enjoyed him getting pissed off that Jason took that kill away from him. But yeah, looking forward to the next upload, where we're at. And yeah, so I'll be back very soon with the next couple chapters of Freddy vs. Jason. Please drop me a comment in the comment section below and let me know what you thought of tonight's chapters, if you're enjoying this book. And what part of the movie are you looking forward to in the novelization? That's my question for all of y'all tonight. So in the comment section below, let me know the part of the movie that you're hoping plays out in the novelization, one of your favorite parts. What is the part you're looking forward to the most? And I'll check those answers out. And in the next upload, whenever I'm doing my outro commentary, I'll read out some of your answers here with your username and everything. Until then, this has been your friendly neighborhood 80s slasher librarian saying, thanks for listening, and
Pleasant dreams!
Hi, this is Jeffrey Reddick, creator of Final Destination.
Greetings, Slashaholics. This is David Bergantino, author of the Freddy Krueger's Tales of Terror books, the Bard's Blood horror Shakespeare books.
Hey guys, this is Jason Brooks, Jason Voorhees from Friday the 13th Vengeance.
Hey, this is Slasher Pepper.
Hey everybody, it's CJ Graham, Jason, Friday the 13th Part 6.
This is William Patterson, known to Friday the 13th fans as Eric Morris.
Hi, this is Deborah Voorhees from Friday the 13th Part 5.
Hey folks, this is Adam Marcus, director of Jason Goes to Hell and Secret Santa.
Hello kiddies, this is John Kassir, the voice of the Crypt Keeper.
Hi, this is Kane Hodder, better known as Jason from Friday the 13th, Victor Crowley from Hatchet.
And you are listening.
You're listening.
And you're listening.
And you're listening.
I just want to make sure you guys know you're listening.
You are listening.
And you are listening.
And you are lucky enough to be listening.
Okay, boils and ghouls, you are listening.
You are listening
to the 80s Slasher Librarian.
To the 80s Slasher Librarian.
To the 80s Slasher Librarian.
The 80s Slasher Librarian.
To the 80s Slasher Librarian.
To 80s slasher librarian.
To 80s slasher librarian.
To the 80s slasher librarian.
To the 80s slasher librarian.
To the 80s slasher librarian. Keep listening, or I'll kill you.